You know, this is just an informative session that we want to make sure that the general public realize what we're dealing with. We're not here to smash anybody or, you know, do anything like that. We're just here to explain what we're trying to accomplish through the city. And I'm gonna turn it over to Dave. You got comments?
Yeah, and you'll hear this, you know, a couple of times today. We have really good employees. There's no doubt about that, but we've needed for some time, we've known this for some time, that they need support and they need training and they need good management. And so our objective always at Public Works is to, I mean, our mission is to provide, you know, drive growth and development within the city of Meridian so we can take care of our assets. And that's what we want to do. We want to be proactive and take care of our assets. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott Phillips, who's with Waggoner. He's going to do a presentation.
And I'm presenting to you what has already been presented to council and to the mayor relative to what we were hired to do. David, next slide. So we were asked to do a 30-day triage, business triage. It was to go through and look at the utility division, which is made up of, next slide, of water and wastewater. And specifically, we were looking at the areas of utility leadership and management, freshwater treatment operations, wastewater treatment operations, the distribution system and storage in the system for water, looking at the collection system for wastewater, workload and asset management for the staff that you had, and then training and workforce development. Those were the areas that we specifically wanted to look at during this 30-day period. Now, you can imagine 30 days is pretty quick, and that's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. Go to the next one. And we had to do it in all these areas. In freshwater treatment, we have the North Water Treatment Plant, and you have the South Water Treatment Plant. In the water lines maintenance, we have about 470 miles of water distribution piping. And then you have 5 storage tanks that make up about 12 million gallons of storage in the system. And then you have 2 wastewater treatment plants. You have the South Wastewater Treatment Plant down by the airport, and you have the East Wastewater Treatment Plant on the east side of town. And then the collection system, which is roughly 450 miles of collection system to take wastewater to those 2 wastewater treatment plants. In all of that, you have 54 people working on all that, on all those assets. And there are 36 unfilled positions at the moment. So what did we find out? Well, what we found out on the water treatment, freshwater treatment side, is you have, Meridian has 2 certified Class B water operators. And you have to have Class B because you use groundwater that has iron and manganese in it. You have limited knowledge of how the North Water Treatment Plant is a very different plant than the B Street plant. The B Street plant's much more straightforward, not quite as sophisticated. The North plant is almost a blend between a wastewater plant and a water plant. And then there was limited knowledge of how the systems work together. They were very good at knowing what their freshwater treatment plants looked like, but how that affected the distribution piping and the storage tanks in the system. And there was a lack of leadership. There wasn't a lot of people. A lot of people had left. So there was just, not that you didn't have people that knew what their job was, but prioritizing and looking to the future beyond just the whole public works department, but focused on freshwater treatment itself. There was a void there. On the south part of the system, which is from about 20th down on the distribution system, there's 1 tank, Mount Barton, 5.5 million gallons of water, so it's a lot of water. It's almost a day of supply for the city, but it can only supply up to about 20th Street. And then if that tank is out of service, we have an issue on the south side of the system. Well, back for a moment, I just want to point out, this pipe that you see here, you know, the issues that the city's dealing with in water and wastewater they didn't happen in the last 2 years or last 5 years. They've happened over the last decades. This is a water pipe that's supposed to be underground, but because you have so much surface water, Sawashi Creek, all the creeks that go into it, it moves, and as it moves, it eats away the soil, and it ate away the soil on this water pipe. So as that pipe moved and bent, it started leaking around that seal right there. That's a 24-inch from the south, or B Street, to Mount Barton that provides that water to the south side of the system. So that's out there, but when you have so much to deal with, 472 miles of pipe, and only 54 people, it takes time to get to those things, and if they're not being prioritized, if they're not being put into what's our biggest bang and what's our highest priority to fix, then people are reacting to what's in front of them. And we're, as David said, we're trying very hard to get away from reactive and get to proactive. Personnel, very reactive in their operations and maintenance, and that's almost by necessity. If something goes wrong, they have to go deal with it. And when about the time they get that done, something else may go wrong, they have to go deal with that. Historic leadership vacuum that kind of keeps people from getting developed. They're not being taught and trained and brought up so that that succession, that next legacy of people are coming through the system. So we had recommended you need additional operators and technicians, people focused on the freshwater treatment plants. Additional training is required in proper operation and maintenance. Update the civil service exam for operators. That's just something that would make it easier as the state certifies operators for you to be able to bring on new certified operators. And then get a water leader to provide the direction, coaching, and accountability for the team. Next slide. Same thing on B Street. You can kind of see these pictures on the left. This is years of not proactively dealing with the assets, but kind of waiting until something went wrong and then fixing it. We need to get more proactive in how we deal with the assets. The facility itself needs optimizing. It operates right now by operating to fill up a tank, and then it shuts down for 2 or 3 days. We need to optimize and make sure that we're running plants consistently. And then there's really no shutdown startup in place. If you're going to shut it down and then start it up, making sure that it's done in a proper way so that something doesn't break. Those were the immediate needs: a maintenance program, optimization plan, hydraulic model, and evaluate those. These are flocculator paddles right here. They rotate. And we've since fixed those in the last 30 days by getting them welded back together so they can operate. David? The north plant is a little more sophisticated beast. And as you can see, this is called a rapid mix. Within the first week of us being brought on, there was a mixer issue. And all that means is there's a paddle in there that keeps the chemicals that you put in to drop the iron out of the water in solution. And they had stopped. That's what these two things are here. Overflowed the rapid mix tank. And the mayor declared an emergency because we needed more than just 2 people to try to fix it. You can see all those yellow safety vests on the right. That's a contractor working to fix that problem. He had about 9 people on site to do it. They got it done in about 3 weeks, and it's back up and running. And the amount of precipitated iron that had fallen out of the water, had filled those pipes up and was up in the rapid mix to about this level. At some point, if it had not been dealt with, it may have shut down the plant. Next. The distribution system is a lot of pipe. There are leaks in those pipes, so for every amount of water you pull out of a well and you treat it and then you put it in the distribution system and it leaks out on the ground, that's just money down the drain, literally. So We believe there's a lot of opportunity to save money by really identifying those, getting a work management system in place, which this side of the utility hasn't had, and use that to start eliminating a lot of those leaks. The city's already started on the recommendation of a hydraulic model, but the valve locate exercise program and implementing a backflow, we started that, and staying up to date on the inspections. We're now looking at Mount Barton and doing a remote evaluation of that tank because it's so critical to make sure that there are no issues with it. Next. That's that 24-inch break. I want you to, if you can see this pipe, how pitted it is, that's why it's important for us to proactively find these things. Had that pipe ruptured, the fix would have taken days, maybe a week or more. We were able to get the crew out there, find a sleeve that allowed us to clamp it down and get it closed off until we can take the time and plan out a solution. So being able to proactively deal with that versus if that entire joint had released and we'd have been down for days, maybe a week. But it's not just fresh water. And I mean, you're aware that the city's been under a consent decree, and you know, fresh water is what people see because they turn on the taps, right? But the same mindset, the same needs exist on the wastewater side. We have been involved on the wastewater program management, but not really on the operational side, other than to watch and to help as we could in the past with what your public works department's been trying to do. We looked at it, and you really need a lift station department, and I'll show you. These are all lift stations, and what a lift station is because of wastewater comes into a tank, and then a pump pumps it out until it can get it to the wastewater treatment plant. Typically, we try to do gravity where it just flows, but we can't always do that if it's over a hill or something. You can see some of these pictures, how corroded things are. And that's just a matter of, you have over 60 lift stations, 67 lift stations. And that's a lot of lift stations to get to, and right now you have 2 people that are really focused on them. So we really want to recommend dividing the city into zones, putting 2 crews on it, and then starting to proactively go through them. Next. It's kind of the same thing as we talked about on the water side, except it's on the wastewater side. Just get a more robust asset management program that's more proactive than reactive, and expand the training of the current staff needed in the work management systems and processes. Those are the recommendations that we made on that. Develop a more extensive training program that's hands-on. It's not just watching a webinar. There's nothing like going out and knowing, yeah, that's how that works, because it's not the same as watching a webinar or going to a conference. Those are good, but they don't replace hands-on training. Next. This is what we're dealing with right now. And, you know, I've had a lot of people ask me, so does that mean we're in horrible trouble and things are falling apart? Not yet. But if we don't get these things and that water leak that I showed you and the water plant that I showed you in a proactive manner moving forward, we're going in the wrong direction. We can't have sewer manholes overflowing. The consent decree most certainly puts the emphasis on this. We don't have that same consent decree on the water side. We don't want it. We don't want one. So the mayor's trying to proactively deal with that so that we don't have to do that. Many communities find themselves under consent decrees on both the water and wastewater side. We don't want that. Next. Once again, this is a backup that is on the other side of Wendy's, just before 22nd Street on the left, coming into town before you cross Sawashi. This is a manhole, and this is a gravity sewer line that typically would just flow even though it's above ground. But it's surcharged. It's got a blockage in it, it's backed up. And so it's coming out this manhole. They're over there now working to repair that. Lift stations, we talked about that. This is just, we did 30 days we had to do all this. So we did 18 out of 67. And we used the statistics of that. That's roughly 50% had non-operational pumps. If you took that out to 67, that'd be 34. 17% had no operating pump. That's 11. 72% needed a control panel replaced. That's 48. And once again, staff are out there every day doing their job, but they can't get it all done without reacting to all these other things, like that picture I showed you before. Next. One of the recommendations, I mean, there are some lift stations, pump stations that need to be relocated. If you look at the one in the top right corner, you'll see that power panel way up in the air. And the reason is because that area floods. It's in a floodplain. And the water gets up over that manhole. So you can imagine if that water gets up over the manhole and it doesn't have a top on it, all that water just goes into the sewer system and ends up at the wastewater treatment plant, where we put chemicals and electricity into it by blowers, aeration. It costs the city money. We believe there's a lot of money to be saved by getting on the front end of these things. Next. That's that manhole I was just talking about. That flood depth, that panel is high enough that the 500-year flood won't flood it, or I think maybe even the 100-year flood. But it most certainly, if it's that high and it doesn't hit the electrical panel, it most certainly goes into the manhole. Next. Some lift stations, the electrical panels need work. And we want to make sure we have training where people do not put their hands in things like that. Electricity is not something to be messed with, but you can tell. We did get somebody replaced this one, but this and even that still need to be replaced. So when these things happen, we want to be proactive and take care of all of the issues, not just the immediate. And the reason that one on the left was probably replaced is it probably wasn't functional when they found the problem. And they had to replace it, so they replaced it. But really, we need to go back and look at those and go, how do we replace all this in the next year so that we don't have any problems in the future or any safety issues in the future? Go ahead. This is just an overflow manhole for a lift station, so the lift station pump goes out, it goes to that manhole, but you can see it's an old manhole. And because things are growing in it, it's caused a pretty good sized crack. We just need to get it fixed. Just an observation that we made. And I'm sure on their list, but it's probably way down the list because of all the other things like the other pictures you saw. Next. So these were our findings. Your infrastructure is old. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, I mean, you had that water treatment plant. That's the original B Street water plant up on the top right. It was steam operated. This is still there today, but the only thing that's used in there is some electrical wiring and plumbing that connects to your system. And we even have leaks in there. But key infrastructure is partially operating or deteriorating to a point that it needs to be replaced. And there are deficiencies in processes. Everybody knows how they do their job, but it's all right here. And as people leave, that becomes harder and harder to teach new people coming in how to do those jobs. So we believe you need to get those processes formalized. And then outside of the consent decree, most plans to fix, rehabilitate, or address future needs are reactionary. And they need to be more planned out, master planned, capital improvement plans done each year so that you know what projects to fund. Many dedicated employees who have on-the-job experience but really lack necessary training, proper training in credentials, certifications that we would like for them to have. Daily routines are limited to the old position descriptions that they've had, and there really are no key performance indicators. How am I doing on my job other than I come to work, I do what I'm supposed to do all day, and then I go home? And then there's a shortage of personnel in key operational positions. Last slide. We made a recommendation to try to help the city start to develop your staff, your personnel, by bringing in 10 management leaders. There are a lot of doers and very few leaders and managers to help those doers develop. And so we propose bringing in to help the city staff through recruitment, hiring, and training to bolster what you have. Develop appropriate formal processes and systems to support staff so that they effectively and efficiently manage the assets that the city is responsible for. Train those existing employees on the latest operational techniques and help them with new tools to acquire their needed certifications so that you're not like the water plant, you've got 2 certified operators. Let's get 6 certified operators. Recruit new employees to fill necessary positions. Come up with a more holistic plan for the system so that employees know what the future needs are and they start addressing those. And then those inefficiencies that I pointed out where you can save money and potentially even raise some fees to grow fees as in the sense of pre-treatment fees that are required for wastewater, for example, or new economic development where you can offer water, where you can get some new revenue sources. Don't look just at cost cutting, but look for new revenue sources so that then you can start to reward and recognize your people for that. And then evaluate those to offer those costs associated to your customers. Help them with their level of service.